All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Grow Rogue podcast. Today, I am joined by Guy Barretta. Guy and I have we've already hit it off because we've both figured out that our second full-time job is coaching our kids in sports, which if any of you watching this have got young kids in sports, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Guy, a brother in arms in youth coaching, I appreciate you for being on the show. Thanks for joining me.
I appreciate it, Reade. Good morning to everybody. And, from youth coaching, if you can't see the bags under our eyes, that's proof that we are in youth coaching and that we have a second job.
That's right. That's right. Well, as much as we could talk about that all day, I really want to talk about a couple of things. So your moniker, I really like it. It's the COO guy, right?
Correct.
So I love that. But what does that really mean? Just for people that don't know you, for people if they've never heard of you before, can you just give a quick explainer of, who you are, what you do, and like the problem that you are solving in the marketplace?
Yeah, exactly. So after 25 years in business and the last 10 years at executive level positions in a franchising organization and a real estate organization and running a residential real estate brokerage, I started Beretta Consulting in 2023 and really got off and running really in the beginning of 2024. And the reason I started this company is that I realized that there was a huge disconnect with small business owners, specifically franchisees, and specifically in the residential real estate and commercial real estate brokerage space, that they need that individual who's managing their day-to-day operations and helping them achieve the strategic vision that most business owners set out to have. They just can't get to it. You don't go into business saying, hey, I hope I wake up to the day-to-day every single day. Your goal is to really push your business forward. So what do I solve for? As a fractional COO, advisor, and consultant, what I solve for is operational inefficiencies in your business, the ability to pull a business owner out of the day-to-day and look at the company from 30,000 square feet and put a strategic vision in place. And many times that leads to a secondary or tertiary aspect, which is the exit strategy or succession planning. I'm building this so I could either A, sell it, pass it on to the children, C, find a great employee or staff member within our organization who may want to take up this company and propel it forward. So that's really where I come into play. How do I solve for that? Well, if you were to go out right now and hire a consultant or a real COO, you're probably spending $200,000 to $300,000 a year. That's a lot of money for small businesses. I can come in at a fraction of that cost and put the framework together to help you get to where you want to be.
I think that's a great, one description of the challenge that a lot of small business owners and I think it's important to define too that when we're talking about small businesses, what is it? The SBA defines small businesses as being up to like $50 million in annual revenue or something like that.
Right.
And it's not just like mom and pops that we're talking about. These are problems that exist well into the tens of millions in terms of annual revenue. I mean, we deal with it a lot. A lot of our clients live in that revenue range, kind of like the 5 to 50 million range, some
right.
larger. But we definitely see that where it's like the leadership is really stuck in the doing of a lot of the work that's required to move things along, right? To manage the business. And they're not able to get their heads above water long enough to actually be strategic and actually think, and to provide a vision for growth and for the future, much less actually do the things that are really necessary to move the organization forward beyond just, making sure that everybody checks their boxes, right? So it definitely, to me, in my experience, you are definitely addressing a common problem. So what are some of those kind of scenarios that you would tell maybe a business owner or an executive that, hey, if you're having to do X or if you're seeing X issue, then you need some help, right? What are the red flags for them to look out for?
So it really depends on the size of the company. So if we start with the larger companies, the companies that are maybe 20 to 50 million, they probably have an operations manager in place. And the first question I ask any business owner in that range is, what is the role of that operations manager? Are they coming in and making sure nothing breaks every single day? Or are they thinking strategically about what else they can implement within the organization to make sure that the business succeeds and has a long lifeline? I always say that most business owners know what their problems are. I'm an inherently optimistic individual, but as I put on my COO hat, I see other issues in an organization that you may not see. And so it's a combination of putting a plan in place to solve for the issues, the ones that you know about, the ones that you may not know about, and bringing that forward in terms of a plan to move the company forward. I would also say, one of the things that I do to start is I work with that business owner and I do a SWOT analysis. What are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats? But I do it on the company and I do it on the business owner. Because if a business owner can't even identify what they're good and not good at, it's a harder track to get down to solve for issues within the business. And we all come in with our inherent vices, right? Every business owner in America is good at something. Some are good at operations, terrible at sales. Others are great at sales and terrible at marketing. So do you focus on the marketing aspect or focus on the sales aspect? One of the challenges, if you are a business, this is something I'll tell you right now, but if you are a business owner who's really good at sales and you look at your roster of clients or customers and 90% of them came in through you, that's a challenge. Because that means the business only survives because of you and not because of any other relationships that anybody in your organization has built. So we have to solve for that, right? So we have to put something in place to protect those current customers, but also look outside of your network to build what you want to build.
And I think that's big. And I can definitely speak to that challenge of like looking at those customers and asking yourselves which of those actually came from efforts beyond just, me, right?
Yeah.
Because that to me is, it's usually in my experience, the last thing that a founder gives up is the sales. And it's not always true, but for the most part, that is true. And so you can have a well-run machine in a lot of other areas, but if that is still reliant on you, well, then what you've got is a business that's not led by you; it's anchored by you, right? And you could take that out, you could remove sales from that thing, and you could say, well, maybe it's operations or maybe it's some other thing. But you're not actually leading, you're anchoring because the business cannot outgrow your ability to do those things. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, that's a completely fair statement that, it is difficult sometimes to take somebody out of what they're good at, right? But you can't wake up every morning and say, I'm just going to focus on sales and operations be damned and marketing be damned,
right? Yeah.
Right? Like you have to look at the entire organization and, when you as a business owner who may solely focus on sales and thinks that he has to drive that, you have to kind of show them how to pivot and that building the entire infrastructure is going to bring the company to greater heights. Sales is important, but there's other aspects of the business that you really have to look at. And that's a challenge with franchisees. So one of the reasons I focus on franchisees is, to your point, most franchisees are entrepreneurs for the first time, and they are looking to that national brand, that franchisor, to help them with everything in the business. But the franchisor does not do that. That is not their role. Their role is to give you the tools, tech, branding, national exposure, say, Reade, have at it, good luck. By the way, a business consultant will show up, maybe once a month, maybe once a quarter to check in with you and make sure everything's going smoothly. But as a franchisee, you're just there and you're hoping, we're holding out that you're going to learn everything that is needed with regards to business, knowing that no one's telling you what to do, right? So you come from a business where even if you were the highest of the high, you had somebody you're reporting to. Now, no one reports to you. And the challenge is, how do I take the company that I spent $100,000 in or 200,000 and really make it successful?
Yeah. Or years of your life, right? I mean,
Or
probably the
years of your
biggest cost
life,
that
right?
somebody has put in is the time, right? And this is really tough. And so you describe a scenario where, an individual may have spent a lot of time in, working for a larger corporation, and now they're going to do their own thing because they're good at it, which is great. I have changed, and this is sort of a side note, and I'd love to hear what you think about this, given your experience working, having gone from that life to this kind of entrepreneurial life. I have changed my how I advise people when they ask me, because I've had, I've been an entrepreneur for, was it like 12 years now, but I did not start it from I wasn't leaving a long term or a long experience working for a large corporation, right? So and we didn't have kids yet. So the risk for me was relatively low, like, to be totally honest, right? It was like I was doing fine in my career before, but it was like, look, I can see this trajectory going this one direction with this company that I'm with or in this field that I'm in, or I can go this other slightly riskier direction, but the upside is greater. So the calculation was pretty simple for me there.
Right.
But I talked to a lot of friends who, they're approaching 40. They're almost 20 years into their career. They've got a great situation, but they're not super satisfied with it. And they ask, well, should I do what you're doing, man? Should I start my own thing? I think I've got this skill. And my advice to them is, it's not what it used to be, which was, yeah, do it, jump, go for it, follow your dreams, whatever, which I do want people to do. But it's I try to be a little bit more cautious about letting them know what it actually takes, because you go from being a person who's good at a certain thing and is able to make a career on being good at that certain thing, to now you have to package that thing and you have to build that thing into a business. And, it might be simpler in certain areas, right? Where if you're in the manufacturing space and you're going to go buy a manufacturing business or something like that, maybe it's different. But I'm curious to know kind of what your thoughts are on that and how you help those, given your experience, who are transitioning from one very different lifestyle to another one where everything is riding on your shoulders.
So this is a really loaded question, but it's a good one, right? So let me go back to me growing up. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My dad was a seafood purveyor. For those of you that don't know what that is, my dad sold seafood to restaurants, bars, delis, nursing homes, hospitals, even the county jails, and also owned 2 restaurants and owned retail seafood stores. My dad was up at 2 a.m. every morning, went to this Fulton Fish Market in New York City. For those of you, and it's not in Fulton Street anymore. It's not in the South Street Seaport. It's up in Hunts Point now. Was back in Teaneck, New Jersey by 5 a.m. and doing the business and working on the business till 7, 8 o'clock at night. There were days I didn't see my dad. And my dad put me through college because he wanted me to get that corporate job, that Fortune 500. And I've been very blessed with who I worked with. And I worked for startups, and I worked for prop tech companies, and I worked for Fortune 500 companies. But in my dad's world, as an entrepreneur, it was very long hours. And he didn't think that that was right for me or my sister. And he pushed us. But corporate changed, and corporate became a lot of long hours and working your tail off and doing what you need to do. And that's fine. That became an aspect of how we work in the United States. And when I went out and started my own business in 2023, my ultimate goal is that I'm only working, just like you, Reade, that we're only working X amount of hours per month, right? But it takes a lot to get to that point. You're going to be working late hours. I know I have a late night tonight, right? Because I have 5 projects that I just haven't gotten to yet. And, this week, and that has to play into your mindset when you're looking to go off on your own. That yes, the end goal is great. They just want to work a little bit and maintain your hours and have a better work-life balance. But there's a lot underneath to get you to that point. And I'm sure you and your wife experienced it, Reade, when you started out, right? You're like, man, we're kind of working longer hours than we ever worked, but now you're at 12 years in, you're probably at a better place. I'm not even there yet, right? Between the clients that I'm working with, the other components of my business that I'm working on, it's all encompassing. And even with a virtual assistant, they're great, but it's still, they can only do what you tell them what to do. And you have to strategize and put the plan in place so they know what to do. So that's, I would say from an entrepreneurial perspective, like understand that it doesn't come like that. Like it just, you have to put the time and effort in to really grow and build your business. And, your business will grow based on how much effort, time, and experience you have and put into it.
So you make several great points, and you're actually spot on that. I mean, we are 11, 12 years in, and I would say that we hadn't really gotten what I would describe as a relative level of work-life balance until maybe the last couple of years, right? So you're almost a decade in, and it took doing the things that you teach and that you advise clients to do, which is that you've got to build a system that allows you to remove yourself from as much of the operations as possible. And I don't want to put words in your mouth when I say that, but just given what we know about each other, I think you'd likely approve of a lot of the things we did over the last couple of years. And really, it's probably been, we started this in earnest about 4 years ago of saying, look, we cannot just rely on brute force anymore to get everything done. Took about 2 years to really build the systems and processes and to get the right people involved so that we could remove ourselves from some of those things. And then it's been a constant process of refinement and optimization that we know we've still got a long ways to go, I'm sure, because there are things yet that we haven't even learned that we've got to solve for. But it cannot happen until you do those things that you describe. So is there a, we'll call it like a starter checklist, right, that you typically will go with, or is there a process that you go through to help founders, to help executives, to help small businesses to start working on those things? Because it can be intimidating to say, well, okay, I mean, I guess we got to reinvent the entire company, or where do you get people started?
Thankfully, it's not really about reinventing the entire company. It's about, I start with the SWOT analysis and look at personal and business. And then there is an assessment that I run them through, which is a series of questions. So how does this work? What are you looking to do here? What's the best, scenario that can come out of this, right? So what's the issue? What's going on right now? What's the best scenario if we're able to put time and effort into fixing that aspect? The other component that I bring to the table is business planning. And I know, bad word, no one wants to hear that, like business planning, but I actually speak on this. I do some public speaking and I speak on just simple business planning. Three things to focus on every quarter that'll bring you to your goals for the year, right? Don't overcomplicate by putting everything into your business plan, because then you're just going to have that state of stagnation. Whereas if you really just focus on the 3 things per quarter, you can show yourself that you're doing progress. And my goal is to really just be on a checks and balances system with a business owner. Are we achieving what you want to achieve? Are we closer to where you want to get to? The other key point, and this is probably a little different for you because, your significant other is in your business with you. But for most business owners, they don't have anybody to talk to, right? They could go to the chamber event, they can go to the BNI networking or networking event and talk to other business owners, but no one's doing the deep dive into their business and helping them the way they feel that they need to help. You know, the pizzeria in town can't go across the street and talk to the other pizzeria and say, how do you keep your mozzarella so fresh, right? They don't do that. But they may go home at night and say to their significant other, I really need help in keeping my mozzarella fresh, right? I'm Italian, so I always go to pizza, and from New Jersey. But, the challenge is they need that individual, right? That they're just bouncing ideas off of. And hey, Guy, what about this? What about that? So a lot of what I do is that empathetic voice or that empathetic listener, just becoming that. Even though I'm a fractional COO, I become that advisor where you're bouncing ideas off of. We're thinking about strategy in a different way. And you have someone who's challenging you. How many business owners have someone in their organization that actually challenges them? Not too many, because many people are too scared to challenge the CEO who's paying their salary every single day or every single week and giving them that W-2. And that's what many business owners need. They need that person that's saying, wait a minute, why are you doing this? Well, I don't think that's a great idea. Or walk me through why you think that's a good idea. And then coming up with a strategy around it if it still makes sense, or saying, you know, Matt, we're not there yet. Maybe we scrap that for a little bit and let's focus on A, B, and C, and then we're going to get to that. So it's really a give and take in terms of the relationships I have with my business owners that I work with or my clients. I don't want to say it's unique, but I think it is a little unique because I'm not just solving the issues in the business, but I'm also solving for that business owner.
No, that's a great point. I mean, and we experience this in some of the consulting that we do as well, which is like we are an ear and we are a confidant in a lot of ways because we get it. Because you like us have probably dealt with more different businesses in different situations than most people will experience in their entire career, right? Because of the nature of the work that you do. And so you've got the ability to draw from a lot of different types of situations. So, and then we'll say that the computation, right, of all of that allows you to bring a unique perspective, even if that perspective is just, hey, I'm really frustrated about this and I'm not sure even where to start, right? You can at least provide a calm, objective ear to say, hey, I think you might be thinking about this in the wrong way or the right way. Like, hey, your gut is probably the right, is leading you down the right path right now. I think you should go with that. Sometimes they just need to hear that. Sometimes a business owner who's not used to having somebody who they can talk to, they just need to hear their own words back to them so that they can make sense of it, and to not feel like they're being judged for it, or not to feel like they have to be, have their mask on of being in that position of leadership. Because, when you're talking to your team when you're responsible for their salary and their income, it's difficult to, not to trust, and that meaning someone's being dishonest, but it's hard to trust that they're willing to tell you the truth. And a lot of times we'll have that conversation with our clients, say, look, I realize that what I'm about to say to you may not mean great things for the future of our relationship, but I hope that you'll take it in the spirit of constructive feedback. And then we'll tell them the hard truth, right? And almost always we've gotten appreciation from that. And I would imagine that you have seen the same thing.
It's just part of our DNA that we have the hard conversations and we challenge. And it's not a challenge of you're terrible as a business owner. It's why are you thinking that way? But if you're a business owner listening to this, the reason why this is so important is the minute that you become an entrepreneur, and if you're someone that had transitioned out of corporate and now you're an entrepreneur, the minute you become an entrepreneur, your brain is on overload. You're thinking more, your brain is thinking about 100 different things. You're getting older, you may have a little bit of ADD going on as you age. And it's just about getting what's up here in your brain onto paper and see if that's a tangible strategy and if that's something that makes sense for your organization. I deal with it every day. Reade, I'm sure you deal with it every day. We, as entrepreneurs, your brain, it's very difficult to turn off. And I know we're getting to the neurological aspect of it, but when you're responsible for your own revenue and you're responsible for your own money, you're always thinking. And my goal is to pull that out of you, right? And determine what you're thinking. Is that a good strategy? Does that make sense? Is that a product line to get into? Is that something that is going to boost your sales for your business? Is that something that will help increase the staff in your organization? Is that going to boost your bottom line? And many times those are good answers. And sometimes it's like, well, I don't think that's going to work right now. And, I think that's the challenge of an entrepreneur and a business owner.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, I heard someone or had someone explain it to me like this before that, no, this was that famous JFK quote that, the president, the president only deals with, he said something like the president only deals with really difficult problems because if it could have been solved at a lower level, it would have. Right. So that's another challenge that as a founder, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as the president of a company or leader of a company, by the very nature of the problems you're dealing with, that if you've structured everything correctly, the problems you're dealing with are problems that only you can deal with.
Correct.
And so by definition, they're not easy, right? Now, sometimes they might be simple, but that doesn't make them easy, right? If sometimes the decision might mean that we need to let somebody go and it might be really clear and it might be really simple to make that decision, but that doesn't make it easy by any stretch. It's never easy. Well, it's rarely easy to have to make that type of decision. And so to have somebody who can just, confirm like, Guy, I know you don't want to let go of, Bill. You guys go way back, but based on everything you've told me, it's not good for the company that he's around or this or that. And so I think the right thing to do here. But just being that person who can kind of reflect that back and confirm that what their gut is telling them, what they believe to be true is actually the right thing. And they're not going to make a huge mistake. So that's really big. Kudos to you for doing that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough part of the business is the letting go of individuals and trying to choose. I was working with a business, at the beginning of this year in Georgia, and the question came up, do I let this person go? And I said, well, what was this person responsible for? And it was a couple of things, but the big thing was the P&L. And I looked at the P&L and I said, this is an absolute mess. This person did not know how to do a P&L, right? Like, so we could either spend the time to train her on how to do a P&L or we have to move on. And, the moving on made the most sense.
Yep. And as tough as it is to do, sometimes you've got to do just that. Well, I want to get us to, because I don't want to be sensitive to your time, and I want to make sure that we end on a little bit more of a not that this isn't constructive, it's all been very constructive, but talking about letting people go, and which is a tough part of business. But I want to make sure that we go into something that is a little bit more positive.
Okay.
What are some of the things that
that's a good place to end on.
I know, right? Yeah, like, all right, fire people, and then your business will be better, right? We'll move on there. But what are some things that you have seen? And I love to hear this, like success stories, right? Of what are some ways that you've seen your clients, lives really change? I know for us, it's like the greatest feeling in the world for them to come back and say, like, guys, we were able to give bonuses to, people in the company this year that we haven't been able to do before because of, new sales that were driven by your efforts. Like, to us, like, there's no greater testimonial that we can get. Now, we're coming from the perspective of sales and marketing, right, as an agency, but I'm super curious to know, like, what are some of the things that you've talked about with your clients, some of those success stories that you've been able to help them with?
So as we're, one client that comes to mind is I was working with them and they really didn't have a tech stack behind them, a CRM system or anything to manage and track leads coming in and leads going out, and maintaining and staying on top of those leads. And I was a little surprised, right? Because this was a company that actually generated a lot of leads coming off of their website. And from an operational perspective, this was kind of like dipping into sales a little bit, but they wanted me to look at everything. And I felt like that was the biggest win, right? So I looked at several systems that they could utilize that could bring in and track those leads, and then stay on top or drip on those leads to get them to potentially convert to customers. And I thought this was a great opportunity for them to now pivot and put together like a newsletter that would go out, right? So not only did we create the back end system to trap and collect the data and collect the leads, but now we also took what we created and put together a monthly newsletter that went out to these individuals, which put us top of mind, allowed the organization to be known in the market that they were serving. So for me, that was a huge win, because we kind of changed the entire back end structure. And for the owner, it wasn't any more work that he had to do. He's like, this is great. Like this, he's like, you just took X amount of hours off of my time, and I'm able to do what I need to do, which is great. And for me, I was, I saw the benefits of that, right? The leads started bumping, more business started trailing in, and for us, it was a great win. Another one was, another company that I worked with was really the P&L aspect, right? Again, we go back to business owners. What are they good at? What are they not good at? Some business owners are great at finance. Others aren't great at finance. Here we have a P&L that just was a mess. So first thing I did is I really tracked that P&L and tried to figure out everything, and then worked with him to hire somebody who could continue to manage that P&L going forward. But then we also took the P&L and started realizing savings. He was spending X amount of dollars on an answering machine service that was terrible. So I revamped that answering machine service. He was, this business owner was spending money, had money going out on something he didn't even know what it was. So I tracked that money down and tried to figure out, and we look at it and say, oh, well, it's only $500-$600 a month, but that adds up. If you have 3 of those going out every month, that's $1,800 to $2,000 that could be going to your bottom line. And for me, that was a real big win, because we were able to save that company money, right? And I think, we all look at like business in general, and as a fractional COO, I'm either in 2 tracks. I'm either trying to save you money, and I have a lot of connections and a lot of partnerships that can help you save money, or I'm trying to help you gain money, right? From an operational perspective, where can we work to help you bring in more sales, bring in more revenue into your organization so that your bottom line is stronger?
I think that is that's where the focus has got to always go back to. And I think you and I, this is really where our work, kind of reaches that same conversation that we have with clients, which is like, there's a lot of things that we both do that don't have an immediate impact, but over the long term, it has to be proven in the bottom line, right? Or else you and I don't have businesses, right? If we can't add value that reflects in now, that's not entirely true, actually, because if you were to take a lot of business owners and if you told them that, hey, what if you could make the same amount of money, but your life was a lot more peaceful, right? Then that could be a really valuable, proposition,
Right.
sales proposition for you. So I shouldn't say that that's entirely apples to apples there. But ultimately, there has got to be some sort of at least measurable impact, or an impact that the business owner can feel. Now, if they're going on vacation for the first time in 20 years because of the efforts that you've put in, then that's probably a quantifiable enough metric, right? So
Yeah.
that's one
I don't know if we always get credit
yeah.
for that, but there is some
Yeah,
reality in there, right?
yeah.
There's definitely reality in that.
Yeah, and look, as somebody, I mean, who has experienced those, like, I mean, my wife and I run the business. There was a time for, a couple of years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, where between the two of us, like each of us were probably putting in 60, 70 hours a week at a minimum. And like that's not a life that you can sustain for very long, right? You're gonna hit burnout, right? So if somebody came in at that time, now thankfully this is an area where she has a lot of expertise and skill. But if somebody had come in and said, "Hey, look, what if we could have you doing the same revenue, the same level of profit, but we could cut your time investment into the company by 50%, we would have taken that deal, right? Would have been like, how much,
Yeah.
right? What is it? What would it cost? So for a lot, that is a really valuable proposition. But yeah, I mean, being able to point to this and say, hey, look, this is the impact that we've been able to make on your business and in your life. You can have you can have a client for life if you can do that.
Yeah, most of my agreements, most of my retention or my standard agreement is a 6-month agreement, but I'm usually there longer than. But my goal is to get you to a point where maybe I can transition out and you're getting someone from an operations perspective to come in and now manage what we've built. And I just had a client that did that, great client, we'll miss them, but hey, they're at a different place now. But I have a question back to you, Reade. Like, so at what point when you and your wife are working 60 hours a week each, do you say, okay, we're doing too much and we got to get to a level that makes it easier for us?
So the question is, at what point did we say that, hey, this was not something that we could sustain?
That's not sustainable.
Yeah. Well, it was really evident. It was not really even something that she and I were ignoring, to be totally honest. Like we went into it knowing what we were about to do. And I'll peel back the onion a little bit and reveal something. I don't know if we've talked about a lot on our podcast, but I appreciate you asking the question. Is we were the company had gotten a little bloated, in my opinion. Everybody that we had working with us was fantastic. We had no qualms with anybody that was involved on our side, but we just had too many people doing too many different things that were not systemized and put into proper, standard operating procedures. And so we said, look, we've got to get this under control, because what I was doing is I was spending most of my time just directing all those people around and telling them exactly what to do. That was really difficult. She was spending a lot of her time trying to manage all of the various deadlines, the communication, and all the various, the different financials that have to do with that. And so we said, look, what if we peeled things back a little bit? What if we took on a little bit more of the work that needs to be done here while we build those systems and those SOPs, and then we bring people back? We actually did. We brought a lot of the people back that were working with us previously, but in roles that were much more defined and structured. And so going into it, we knew, like, hey, thankfully this is not something that we're planning to do for the long term, because there's no way, right? Like we will put ourselves in early graves. And it was really over the course of the last couple of years where we could start to see those things take effect, right? And I realized we actually have a spreadsheet of all those different things in the business, like every single, standard, input that goes into the business. And it was on my plate or her plate, and then we marked them off when they were delegated, right? And there's a link to an SOP and a video explainer for how to do it. Now we made sure to find good people that could also be creative within that structure. But it was like, now we have this big long list, and it's like, look at all the things that I don't have to personally do anymore, right. And all these things get done. Not only do they get done without me having to do them, but they're being done by somebody who specifically does that thing. And so it's getting done better than I could do it if I did it on my own. And so that was like, it made it into a measurable process. It wasn't just like, well, I kind of feel like we've got a little bit more balance. It was like, no, that's something that I used to do. We had a specific project in mind for getting that off of my plate, and now I don't have to do that thing, but it's getting done better than it was when I was doing it.
That's
And so
great.
that was just a phenomenal thing. I mean, you and I half joked about our second full-time job of coaching kids sports. I'm coaching 3 different youth teams right now, and sometimes my wife and I will look at each other and be like, "There's no way we could have done this a couple of years ago."
Right.
Like we weren't finishing the workday until 7 or 8 o'clock.
Right.
No way we could have been at 5:30 p.m. practice or be at a game at 4:45 to warm up for a 5:30 start time. And it's not that it's easy to do that now, but it's possible now because we've built a business that doesn't need us every minute of the day. We've got great people that are in positions to do things they do well within the structure that we've designed. And we've got a process for delivering things to clients and then showing them through KPIs and dashboards and proof that what we're doing works. And so they stick around for a really long time. So it has been a huge, huge boon to the business and our personal lives.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, I think that's what we all strive for, right? To get to a point where, because even as entrepreneurs, we're always doing outreach, and you have to kind of automate that and get people doing that on your behalf, and trying to build the life that we wanted to build when we decided to go off on our own. I mean, that's so important.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of the reasons why I was so excited to have you on the show, because I know how much it can impact like a person's actual life. And so, I think that's probably as good of a segue as I'm going to be able to find to be able to get you back to your day. Guy, this has been so helpful to me. It's been so great to be able to have, an expert talk about the things that I know changed our lives in a lot of ways. And so thank you for coming on. Thank you for being a part of this. Before you go though, can you just tell our audience, what's the best way for them to learn more about you and what your business may be able to help them with?
Yeah, so I have a couple places you could look for, look to find me. So I have my website, which is the COOGuy.com. That's TheCOOGUY.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Please link into me. I think that's a great tool and resource for business owners to learn, about how to manage and run their business. I have a newsletter that comes out every Sunday called Sunday Coffee with the COO Guy and Sunday Conversations with the COO Guy. So I encourage you to look at that newsletter that comes out every Sunday around 9:45-ish, and you'll find some great information there. I think you brought a great point up, Reade. It's like our goal is just to really help and work where we're needed. If we're needed in your organization, we should probably have a conversation. And my email is, did I say my email yet? I don't know if I said my email. No, I didn't. Guy Barretta, BARRETTA at the TheCOOGuy.com.
And for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, we will make sure that Guy's info is in the description. So just click on that, read more, and it'll show all of those links that Guy just mentioned. Guy, I really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you for joining me. Yeah, and thanks for teaching our audience how they can build a better business. And I genuinely hope we'll have another chance to chat soon. We'll get together and you can take me to the best New Jersey pizza place.
That's a tough ask. I mean, you might have to come up for like 3 or 4 days, and we might have to choose a couple.
We'll make a trip out of it. It sounds great. Yeah.
And it's not Domino's.
It better not be. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much, Guy. We'll and thanks for everybody who's watching this.
Yeah. Thanks for
make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube.